Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Conscious Parenting series hosted on the Bitcoin Consciousness podcast. I'm really excited to be starting this series, and I want to extend my thanks to Sama for helping me get it going. This first episode of the Conscious Parenting series begins with an introduction through what I call the Conscious Parenting White Paper. Now, I wrote this white paper in order to, number one, strike the appropriate audience, and two, to set the stage for this and all future conversations on the series. You can download a PDF copy of the white paper in the description. So in this episode, Sama and I talk about our emotions and how they are designed to be used, the old parenting paradigms and their motivations, honoring the sovereignty of our kids, whether or not formal education is really necessary, subject-based learning versus curiosity-based learning, the motivation of externalities versus creation, treating all of life as a playground, and so much more. This was a really deep and powerful first conversation to break the seal on the Conscious Parenting series, and I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. So before we get into this conversation with Sama, I want to begin with an introduction through the Conscious Parenting white paper that I wrote. Now this is just a jumping off point, and really the entire object of this podcast is to continue exploring, learning, and expanding models. So someday I hope to turn around and see this white paper as merely an incredibly early iteration, a 0.0001 version of what conscious parenting really is. So here it goes. What does it feel like to be a child? Take a second and breathe deep. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself 9 or 10 years old, enjoying a warm summer day, interacting with friends on the playground or at school, just being. Notice the way your entire body feels, any emotions that come up, and just let the emotions run wild. Try to really take yourself back. Witness and feel the thoughts and desires of your inner child. Coming back to the present, how does this feel in comparison to you on an average day? Is it generally better or worse? It's a little sad, but I would venture to guess that for the average individual, the answer is the latter. For the average human, the first 10 to 13 years of life start so simply, with no models or expectations for life. That thing you've been worrying about all of your adult life, where was it then? Or, since we're Bitcoiners, how about that passionate distrust of the current system? For me, it's pretty plain to see. I grew up. But what the hell does that even mean? It seems that up until this point in humanity's accepted history, growing up means taking our clean slates from childhood and drawing mental models, identities, and protections. If any of these things break through the process, we hide away the pain and build something stronger on top of the rubble. The more deeply rooted in these things one can become, the more he is honored as, quote-unquote, mature. We ossify these things to the point where our entire lives become one enormous distortion. Sadly, this cycle continues when we have kids of our own. Our children experience the same filters inherited in their physical bodies, and we insist in their ossification by providing examples and directions on how to bury fear and pain. This is the way it's been for a very, very long time. Distortions have been building on top of one another, generation after generation, like putting on layers and layers of reading glasses until the light itself becomes imperceivable. Now that I have all of you sufficiently bummed out, let's explore why I feel so compelled to start this conversation. One could say this is a bit of a selfish endeavor, but for better or worse, one of my most robust programs has been to become better in every way possible, including, since May of 2020, becoming the best father I can be. That, coupled with an insatiable curiosity, has inspired me to bring together like-minded people to start having serious conversations about how we are raising our kids. For me, nothing is off the table when it comes to this topic. I actually feel a little uncomfortable speaking that sentence But if Bitcoin has taught me anything, it is that the faster I can shatter my models and question my programming, the brighter my light becomes. So welcome to Conscious Parenting. This is a place to commune with people dedicated to discovering parenthood's true mission. People who believe in their power as sovereign individuals, who wish to parent from example and love instead of control and fear. This is a place for people who know in their hearts that we have just as much to learn from our children as our children do from us. It has been far too long since we have apathetically sat back and let life happen to us and our families. It is time we take our fate back into our own hands, stop bending to our fears and distortions, and set examples of decentralized truth for our children. Through universal reverence of our souls and their sovereignty, our world will completely change, one parent at a time. Welcome to Conscious Parenting. I'm excited to start this journey with you all. All right, Sama, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you for this initiative. I think it's really a great idea. It's such an important topic. And since you brought it up, I've been thinking about it. So let's see what comes out of this conversation.
Yeah, kind of as I mentioned in the introduction, this initiative was really birthed from my own curiosity and desire to become a better parent. So in that way, I feel like it's sort of a selfish endeavor, to learn from people like you and connect with people with similar mindsets around this topic, because I think it's so important that we start having conversations about this because, and this is probably a fantastic first question for you, it seems to me like so much of what we deal with as adults is centered around events that happened to us when we were children. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think I go into some controversial water straight away here because my perspective is that the mother lode of our patterns that actually create our childhood experiences comes from our ancestors, our bloodline. So it's these patterns, survival patterns that have been passed from generation to generation for a long time. So when they come to us and our generation, it's like we get them through the breast milk, you could say. We get it through the DNA, as similar as the eye color, hair color, body structure, and all this. We also get the like mindsets and illnesses and all these patterns that have been haunting the family for generations. On top of that, we also get then the experiences from our parents. So we are sort of both from inside, we have these patterns, and we get even more patterns from the parents and culture on the outside. But it's I can't see it anymore as that we are like a blank slate. So it's like, oh, we are completely innocent souls coming into this body, and then we're just shaped by the culture. But it's really like this, we inherit a lot of patterns. So even if we experience something when we are like 7 years old, that is a bad experience, then why did we attract that experience? Why did we end up in that situations where that happened? And this is how deep these patterns go. So if someone in 3 generations back created a pattern to survive something terrible, then that pattern is then alive in the children of today. And that's why we call it like human nature, but it's more like family nature, because it's patterns different from different families. So then this is what brings the children into different situations, and sort of the what comes to us from the external world is depending on these patterns, because they're sort of pinging in on our energy body. So I don't see the external world as a separate thing that comes in and damages us as children, but it's the programming inside the children already. And then we attract events that sort of becomes the next layer of the family inheritance. So when we talk about childhood trauma and so on, it's sort of just the tip of the iceberg, where we can look at that, we can relate to that, but often we find deeper patterns buried underneath that was actually the cause for it to happen when we start digging deeper and deeper and deeper. So that's how I see it at this time. But my models keep on updating and changing and expanding all the time. But at this moment, this is how I think about this question.
This is such an interesting perspective to me. I have a 2-year-old son, and there's a common phrase, the terrible twos. And, one of his most common reactions when he gets really, really angry or really, really upset is to throw things or hit things or lash out or yell. And I want to say that I can see and feel that pattern within myself. It's more restrained now as an adult. When I was a kid, I would do stuff like that all the time. But what's really interesting is that this concept of the terrible tooth, and really most toddlers react this way when it comes to something that upsets them or something that doesn't meet their expectations. So in that case, I feel like, yeah, there's something in my DNA that maybe I gave to him that I was reminiscent. However, this is something that all 2-year-olds are going through. Maybe in slightly different ways, slightly different reactions, but it's pretty common. I think what's so interesting today, as so many different methods of parenting are being explored, one of the increasingly popular styles of parenting is called gentle parenting, and it really takes into account your role as a parent, as a validator for that child's feelings. So, what are your perspectives on emotions really in the human body in general, I would say, not just within kids, but what role do our emotions play, and how should we relay that information to our kids? How do we explain this emotion? How do we help them to understand what these things are?
So I think emotions are supposed to be like a social guiding system, like guiding us when people are trespassing over our borders or our boundaries, or when something is not done right to us. So the emotions are sort of helping us to react as a survival mechanism, you could say, or to make sure that we hold a good space, that we feel balanced in life. And if we have any area that we are weak in, we will feel push from emotions that we need to look at that area, we need to do something about that. So it helps us to sort of shape ourselves into the optimal best human we can be. but that's how they're supposed to work. And because of the programs coming, the patterns from parents, and because of the culture is not encouraging free-flowing feelings. So we are now in a place where we can't really trust our emotions because they are so damaged, they're so distorted, they're triggering in layers of old memories that we haven't resolved. So it's sort of, if you look at a normal family today, then the emotional system that is supposed to help us is sort of out of whack. So we need to separate between a good operating emotional system and a damaged system, which is in the normal case these days.
It's a different perspective from what sort of the mainstream is, or at least has been for a while.
Yeah, I think before, like the old conservative sciences, they were not even able to imagine a fully functioning emotional system. So they just tried to sort of fix and improve the damaged one. So many of the books and studies and research that is done, it's like they're just looking at the damaged and like, how can we make this better for people so they're not completely destroying themselves or committing suicide and so on. So it's more like fixing a broken thing, while if we are talking about higher consciousness, then we can experience it, or we can get glimpses of how emotions are supposed to be helping us in life. I think that's why when you read mainstream books and so on, they're talking about a damaged emotional system.
So if we were living in an ideal world where all of mankind knows how to use their emotional system, what does that look like? Like, run through an example where, let's say I get super angry about something. How do I use it? How do I use that emotion as a tool instead of just burying it, or, trying to hide it or ignore it?
I don't think we would come to that point. It starts with like small nudges, like small frequency signals before it turns into anger. Anger is sort of the end result if we keep ignoring the signals. But if we look at a society, hypothetical society, where everyone is aware of their energy bodies and they have good working emotional systems, it's also included in that package that, like an inner mixing board, we can like look into our emotional body and see how it's working, what's going on, if it's anything blocked. So usually if you're saying this scenario, it's nothing blocked. It's like everything is in perfect harmony with the creation. So your actions are in harmony with the creation, and the people you interact with, they're also taking actions in harmony with creation. And because when we take actions in harmony with our true self and with the creation, that's sort of the goal. That's where the emotional body is trying to guide us. So we take those actions that are always win-win actions. It's win for us, it's win for them, and it's win for the world, because we produce a high signal in that interaction. But we can also then look at other channels. So we can easily tap into the other person's energy body, and so we can easily feel their intent with what they are coming at us. So their intent, if they take an action towards us, so we can already feel their intent. So it will be much less confusion. So if someone would take an action that would sort of create sort of an anger-ish signal in us, it means that they would overstep our boundaries, because we will be sovereign individuals, everyone, sovereign souls. So if someone is then saying, you should do like that, then that's overstepping our boundaries. And since that is not a pure request in harmony with their true self, they made sort of an error. So then we will probably get at least two signals. We will get like a response from our emotional body saying, this is not okay. If someone is invading our space with something not aligned with us. And we can also then tap into the other persons and we can, it's because he was hurt. And then that produced like a defense mechanism that is now playing out in form of a projection onto us. Because it's only when we act through projections, basically, and old situations coming up as a filter in front of our eyes, and we don't know this, so we act on that filter. So this means we don't act actually to the person, we act according to an old situation, and then we sort of damage that person. We don't act in alignment with how it should be. So it's always coming from this misalignment that starts somewhere. So in this case, you pick up your own signal and then you check his signal and then you say, I think actually you made a slight mistake there. Maybe take a look at that situation that caused the misalignment from the beginning and try again. Then you sort of fix that situation, that interaction. So that small little anger signal didn't even come that far as a physical expression. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. I'm trying to kind of put together a scenario for my 2-year-old son, just kind of as an example. Like this morning, he wanted to watch a bit of TV. So, what we do to sort of set an expectation for him to try to limit the time, we'll set a little timer going and we'll say, okay, when the timer goes off, then we're all done watching TV. It's sort of, that's actually kind of a gentle parenting method. And once the timer went off, he still got really angry. And now I am kind of viewing it through your lens where it's like, okay, we were interfering with his sovereignty and that made him upset. But I think one thing that can be very confusing to people is, obviously if there's got to be a limit, there's got to be a line in this example where I'm not going to let my son just sit there for the 12 waking hours that he has in the day and just watch TV, because I don't think he would actually do that. But for me, it doesn't seem like watching TV, or through my experience and, the models that I have today, it's not necessarily a good activity. This is a perspective that I have now taken through my life, through watching TV, through seeing other people watch TV. So it's like, okay, yeah, I don't think that this is necessarily a good thing for my son to be doing a large amount of the time. So for that reason, I find it important that I guide him away from the TV, even though that he finds an interest in it and would watch it for a long time. I want to guide him away from that. Isn't that, that interference in his sovereignty? Obviously, he is a sovereign individual. Obviously, he has limits in this existence. And there are things which are good for him. There are things which are probably not so good. How do we toe this line of guidance versus control while still honoring our kids as sovereign individuals?
Yeah. It's like we are their guides here. They're coming into this reality where it's a lot going on. So we are their guides. And it's like a longer process. So let's look at like where we want to go, like where we would like our children to end up. We could say 20 years, or we could say 30 years. Like when they are 25, let's say. Like, how do we want them to operate? And if we start mapping that out, then it's sort of easier to then go backwards and sort of guide them through those 25 years with a sort of a goal in mind, rather than improvising every step of the way. So should we do that? Should we look at what could be like a optimal human 25 years old?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's do that together. But I can start. I think what has become clear to me is the relationship between the intuitive mind and the rational mind is very important, together with physical strength and nutrition. So, and we're moving away, quite far away from what is considered mainstream 25-year-old to be able to do this, because it's conscious parenting. So we need to know, like, okay, what do we even consider being a conscious person? How do we want them to end up?
Yeah, it's so much different than what it's been up to this point. It's the ideal 25-year-old was, they're going out and working hard to, find a good job, build a career. They likely, in the ideal parents' eye, they have a college degree and they're spending a lot of their time working. It's a career centered. And from the consciousness perspective, it's much, much different.
Yeah, and a big part of this is the rational mind. In traditional parenting, it's traumatizing. It's like imprinting into the rational mind models of fear that will control the children for the rest of their lives. So it's sort of like unconscious imprinting. So parents are controlling children and forcing them into things they don't like, and meeting difficult challenges that they're not ready for, and all these things. So basically it's like a big programming, the conditioning process. And this is what most people then have to spend the rest of their life on doing. So I think we can agree on that we don't want to do that. But what can we then do? Because the rational mind, it's like what I call the pure rational mind, or like higher consciousness rational mind. This is when models are constantly changing and expanding, while the old parenting method is like fixed and strong imprints that will guide them. So they will be fear-based for the rest of their lives. But if we instead encourage the children to create models and to upgrade their models, then when they're 25-year-olds, they will have a very, very well-working rational mind that will constantly make new models depending on the situations they are in. They will read their inner signals and external signals, and they will not identify with the models, because again, the old parenting methods forces the children to start identifying with all these victim roles that they create. So when they come out and they're 25-year-old, they're full of confusing programs that they think they are identifying with this. So this we try to really avoid. So if we keep their rational mind fresh and unattached to different personalities, like who am I? So in the 25-year-old that it's working good, he doesn't have a fixed idea of who he is. It's much more dynamic idea of who he is as a multidimensional being, probably. Because without this imprinting, they get access to the intuition where they can sense other realities, they can sense the different layers in the energy body, they can sense other people's emotions and so on. It will just be a natural part of it. So I think what I'm going for is a 25-year-old that is in this edge between the unknown and the known, because the intuition is sort of the unknown. So it's like you're using your intuitive mind to stretch out, tap into anything in the universe, any person, or any system within your own body. You can status check for all the different body parts and all the different chakras. So that's sort of the unknown, which you just probing with your curiosity around. And then you have the rational mind constantly making new models, updating how the world works and so on. So this is very different from now, because normal 25-year-old today is operating from fixed rational models that they think are true. So they're never actually interacting with the real reality, because also their intuition is shut down. So they are operating completely on old trauma-based models. And this is their whole reality. Do you want to add something about that?
Well, there's a couple things. So the first being, it's almost like as the guides of our children, we kind of need to teach them about these two different systems, because the ideal 25-year-old that you're talking about is working in a world, living in a world where, ideally everybody is, everybody is working and living from their inner selves. Everything's expanding and changing, and everyone's following an inner guidance and intuition. There isn't all of this fear telling them to, oh, I gotta work on my career. I gotta make more money. I gotta save up X amount of money for a rainy day. It's much less in fear, and it's much more in just like trusting the flow of the universe. And it's so far-fetched that from what we have now, that it brings up a lot of fear in people, and even in me. As we discuss this, it's like, all right, come on, Sama, this is utopic, right? How we gotta like, how do we bridge between what we have now and the world of the ideal 25-year-old? Because, and I'm just kind of trying to reflect maybe some of the fears of the audience as well. It's just, you don't want to create, I think one of the biggest fears is that you are going to essentially create a human being who, struggles with direction in life, who is very passive.
Why would you say that?
Because when I was growing up, there was so much centered around this idea of, what do you want to be when you grow up? Do you want to be a policeman? Do you want to be an astronaut? The ideal was always like a very highly acclaimed, career, an actor, or you want to be the president or something like this. And you were sort of taught that this is like the ideal that you have to work toward. My limited models, which is why we're having this conversation, is to expand them. My limited models are making me feel fear that, well, if I don't teach my child and I don't tell him, you need to be aspiring to something, what do you want to be when you grow up? Then he's just going to wander aimlessly. And then that, of course, triggers another thing, which, does that make me a bad parent? Because your child is sort of like this trophy that you're supposed to be proud of in life. Look at all that my child is doing for themselves and their family. This is because of my parenting and all this sort of thing.
Yeah, I think those kind of ideas comes from people who have not found themselves yet. And if a person have not found themselves, then they can't relate to the idea of their child finding themselves. So it's like a reference point. So for me, I know that when I let go of everything, that's when I started living. That's when I found myself, and I started living more in flow. So it's like, if we don't believe in that, or if we can't understand that, then we feel that we need to shape our children. But if we understand that they actually have a life force, an amazing life force inside of them, and that if we can keep this burning, that they will be much more energized than the normal 25-year-old. And they will do so many projects. And because there's like the joy of being a conscious soul on earth, it's very, very exciting. It's like being in a playground, but you're adult. So instead of the different toys in the playground, you have different careers and different projects with different people, and it's like different art forms and different computing languages and everything like that. So those are then toys for a 25-year-old like that. So it's like they continue just playing, and they continue to just follow their inner curiosity. But if we don't believe that humans have this curiosity, then that's when we go more towards the old fashioned. No, we don't want to trust that the child has this spirit inside, so we better shape it from what we think is better.
This is such an awesome concept, because when I think of conscious parenting, I think about my role as a parent is guidance through example. And if I can show my children that when I find myself and when I live through my true self and live through my intuition, my curiosity, and I live with the flow of life instead of living in fear, that creates the abundance and the growth, the love. It brings me everything that I need. So for me, that is a big deal. It's about finding yourself, because we're in a world where we're very scientific, we're very physical. We need physical proof. We need examples. We need to test things in order for us to have any faith that these things are real or that these theories could even play out. So I think for a lot of parents, if you've sort of been feeling lost as a person, as a mom or a dad, maybe this is your opportunity to begin looking within and to begin connecting with yourself for your kids and for yourself first and foremost, but for your kids will be probably the secondary beneficiary of your own growth.
So I have two daughters. They are 13 and 17. So I have experience of trying to mold them for a while, because I was worried, and it seemed best for them to go to school. And so they have been going through different school systems and really getting to know the society in different shapes and forms. And it's also, what I also been doing is like questioning their assumptions and their beliefs. So to keep that rational mind crisp, so they don't get stuck in any particular personality, but they keep an open mind, so to speak. And when they're children, this happens automatically when they're young, because with every age, they sort of create new models all the time, new personalities, to become new people all the time. But when they become a little bit older, then they start having like ideas and philosophies and worldviews. And so it's all in the sort of the rational mind. And in school environments, they are encouraged to sort of hold on to beliefs and identify with them. And it's the way young kids communicate. It's like, yeah, I'm like this and I believe like this and so on. So what has happened is and it's two daughters, so it's two different stories. But if I say the 17-year-old, I told her a few years ago that if she wants to continue to go to school, she can, but she don't have to. It's many other options what to do. But she decided to continue go to school, and it has been amazing to see her rational mind to stay fresh, even though she's in many hours per day. She's in these situations where people are having strong ideas and teachers are using authority against the children and so on. And because she doesn't have the same tendency to get stuck in ideas, she's just able to take in new information all the time. And this includes being able to communicate with all types of people. So it's not that she becomes like strange just because she's not having so much traumatic programming, but instead she's able to use this intelligence to understand where people come from. And she's also like empathic, so she can feel vibes and so on. So she uses her abilities that are sort of natural in our home. So this has given me more confidence in this kind of parenting that I'm suggesting, that it's amazing what we can do when we have a rational mind that is not so constrained, because she calculates everything into these models of hers and she's using them to her strengths. So she understands the propaganda, she understands the positions of all the people in her class, but most of the time she doesn't use this against them. It's just part of her mental models and using her intuition to pick up on vibes and so on. So she's like her own little data central where she is in life, in her environment, and it's making her stronger and better, rather than before in life. I was more worried that she would become strange, so I thought, oh, it's better she goes to normal school. But then it came to a point where like, no, I can't do this anymore. So, but then it was her own choice, and then of course it's okay. Yeah, that's just one example.
So what you're saying is what she's doing is she's taking the lower frequency models, observing them as they come in on a daily basis and using them to expand her own mind and expand her own consciousness. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at earlier. It's like it's almost like you're teaching the kids about these two different worlds. Use the old one as like a base of models that can be shattered. It's like, look how quickly these supposed truths can just be completely shattered. And look how, from the scale of humanity, all these things that we believe to be 100% true, how quickly and easily they can be disproven, anecdotally or not. I mean, there are things that beliefs that we largely hold that if you just ask a simple question, it's like, gosh, maybe there's a little bit of an asterisk here. Maybe there's like, okay, this model can't be 100% true. And, in doing that, in shattering those beliefs, it brings us closer to the truth, which the truth to me is like impossible to define. And the only way to continue to define it, this thing that's ever expanding, is to continue asking the question, why? Just keep asking why. And do not be afraid to ask the question, why? So one very important question and obviously, you are just one man with one perspective. Do you believe that a formal education for a child is necessary?
No, definitely not.
And why not?
I've seen education close up. I know it quite well, both as a child and as an adult. And it's, yeah, first of all, it's centralized. So it doesn't respect anyone's sovereignty. And if you're exposed to that over a longer time, you become corrupt or you lose your sovereignty. So that's just one reason for it. It's so many reasons. So it's maybe more about like what should we do then? What should we have instead? Or why do I allow my daughter to go to school? I think it's what you said about the old world and new world. And if we bring our children only to higher consciousness people, then it will be like this kind of prince, like Buddha, growing up in this castle where everyone is just rich and happy or so on. And then one day he walks out and it's like a completely separate world. And so how to integrate all different experiences in society and what to limit them from or what to expose them to, that's a big question.
I'm a very similar perspective to you. I don't believe that it is necessary for children to have a formal education. And that's pretty controversial. Like, there's not a lot of people that are going to immediately understand that perspective, and that's okay. But, when I suggest, okay, maybe let's keep our son home and let's homeschool him, immediately the fear that comes up for people is, well, but what about socialization? Or, yeah, but you don't know how to teach, you don't know how to educate. What's the curriculum look like? There's all these fears. It's all fears. Aren't you scared that this might not work?
Yeah. And this is, as so many other things, it's like, we talked about before that we have the old patterns from our parents. And so should we believe them? And usually all the doubts and fears are in those. And then we have our more spiritual aspects that are living in abundance and unconditional love. And so should we listen to our fearful selves or should we listen to our unconditional selves? And this is also important for us about our life choices, how we want to live as parents, but also then how we want to help our children. Should we help them from an unconditional love space or should we help them from this fear space?
Let's say in the extreme scenario, my child doesn't receive any formal education whatsoever. The immediate fear that comes up for me is like, well, what if he's not going to be able to read? I mean, he'll be illiterate. He won't be able to function in this world. That's a fear that immediately comes up. That's like defining the way that I think. But what if my child is naturally curious? What if my child naturally wants to learn to read on his own? Let's say one day he's like, you know what? I saw my dad read this sign over here, or, maybe my dad got a check and he read what was on the check. I'm really curious to know what that says. I think that instead of teaching kids when maybe they're not ready to, it's just completely different. It's teaching kids when they want to learn and when they're actually curious about a subject. And I think that they'll be curious naturally about everything. And I think that at some point in their life, they're going to be intrigued by mathematics. And some point in their life, they'll be intrigued by science. Some will be more than others, yeah. But as far as teaching kids subjects in order to, quote unquote, help them function in a society, that's such a fear-based mode of wanting kids to grow and learn. And I think first and foremost, one of the first thing that a child wants to learn is how to talk with the adults in the room. When they see mom and dad conversing with each other in a normal tone of voice and they're reading and they're acting and functioning well in this world, the kid wants to be in that conversation. They want to be a part of that flow of energy with the parents. And that is like, that's their first and foremost natural inclination. So I think in just questioning this concept of, well, we have to teach the child how to function in society, it's a really big false construct.
And that brings me to my younger daughter, because she chose to not go to school. So she's on online school community, you could say, where it's like student led, where they create their own timetables. They can pick whatever subjects or whatever projects they want. And maybe rather than subjects, I think if you look at curiosity and how it sort of shapes itself through children, it's usually not a subject, but it's more like a project or a thing they want to build or something they want to create. And then different subjects are built into that process. Like if you want to be an architect and you want to build these houses, you know, you need to calculate stuff and understand all this mathematics. But it comes sort of naturally to learn that, not because they have this idea, oh, I want to become really good at mathematics, because that's usually like parents are pushing them and then saying, oh, if you're very good at mathematics, I will give you a big Christmas present or something like that. Usually that's sort of exterior motivation, you know, when it's like you're motivated by something that you get. But this intrinsic motivation, that's the curiosity, that's the creativity, that's the life force flowing through the child. And they just naturally want to build and create, like these toys I said before, like in the playground. So when they're a little bit older, it's not the playground, but it's instead, it could be web-based tools, or it could be they want to create their own workshop at home for whatever materials they love to hold in. And it also comes down to flow state, actually. And it's like showing the kids or giving the kids opportunity for them to figure out and feel their flow state. So sometimes, you know, I can check with my daughter. It's like, so how do you feel when you do this? And how do you feel when you do that? Then she would describe basically flow state when she's doing some stuff, because the activities is making her so happy and she feels it's like timeless state. And that's similar to how I experience flow state also. It's like, I love what I'm doing. It feels like I'm at the right time, at the right place, and time stop existing. So if they can find that in one or two or maybe many things, maybe 10 things, like Leonardo da Vinci, you know, he was this kind of person that he was just playing with all the things that he discovered. He was like a big child, you can say. And I think he could be like a role model for children. I think that's sort of their nature, to have all these curiosities, if they are allowed to find those moments of flow.
It's kind of like you're describing a lifestyle of hobbies. You know, we would define what you're talking about as hobby. So if a child becomes interested in a thing for a while and they want to learn everything about it and get very into it, and then after a while it's like, okay, I understand this, I'm ready to move on. That's kind of the nature of hobbies. It's people will pick up hobbies, they'll get really into them, and then they'll kind of leave them behind. So I think there are glimpses of examples of, you know, people doing things like this, like creating a workshop and doing woodworking for a time, and then after a while it doesn't fulfill them in the same way, and so they'll pick up a new hobby. And so, you know, our natural curiosity and our desire for fulfillment, even as adults, still shines through all of this fear, which is very encouraging, because we have an example, and so we know what it feels like to kind of be in the state of flow through our hobbies. So imagine that being your life. Imagine being in a world where your hobbies create value for other people, and people see that value, and it unlocks the abundance in your life or in your child's life. I don't know, it's really amazing.
Yeah, it's this family from Holland called the Bitcoin family, and one time I saw an interview with him, Tahitu, and uh, and he said that his goal was that the children would have enough Bitcoin so that they would never have to work to earn money. So it's like, imagine a life where you don't have to work if you don't want to. And that's sort of just a natural state. So they are also not in public schooling, his children. So they learn how to tap into their creativity and create. No, and then having the foundation with Bitcoin, this means that when they are 25 or whatever age we want to say, then they will have this foundation of being able to know what they want to do because they've been doing it all their lives. And at the same time, they have the foundation of the Bitcoin that they never have to do anything that they don't want to. They could sleep for 4 years if they want to, but they don't want to do that because they like to create, because they're used to it. It's not like coming out from the public school, and if you then say, oh, now you don't have to do anything, then they might sleep for 4 years because they have erased the creativity and the spark from inside. So you only are living for external reward. And if you don't need an external reward, then you don't do anything. But if you're used to just creating, following your inner guidance, your inner flow, your inner curiosity, and you don't have any fears because you don't have to do anything unless you want to, it's like then they are on a path where whatever they do will bring value to the world, because they will do it from a place of truth, or they will do it from a place of purity, because they will not do it for money. They will not do it for fear. And this is where what I call like the Bitcoin consciousness, where we can go, where everyone feels like this. And are just allowing all those fear patterns to just dissipate from our system because they're not needed anymore. So we all come into this feeling of abundance, unconditional love, and we allow ourselves to vibrate at that signal. And then any fears that come up is like, oh, this old trash, and just let it go. And then we all start doing things because of our inner creativity. So we all start creating value for the world, like pure things, because it's not made from greed or fear. So that's how I see it's going.
So the last question that I wanted to ask of you, Sama, was what would you say up to this point has been your greatest lesson as a parent?
That's an interesting question. I have felt a lot of inner conflict when it comes to this, with schooling or not, and how much to expose them to society. And my lesson up to this point is that it doesn't matter so much. That if we keep on just having this intention that they should be free individuals, sovereign souls, that we want them to be their true selves, then the details doesn't matter so much, in which school they go and however it works out. So it's more about the compass. If we have the compass on true north, from my experience.
Beautifully said. Thank you very much. Anything else you wanted to add?
No, just thank you for your initiative again. And I'm excited to see you run with this, to allow your inner creativity to blossom here on the podcast in any shape or form it may take. I just wish you a lot of fun.
Well, I appreciate that. And I very much appreciate your perspective. And I appreciate the sort of the push, because this has been kind of brewing for some time. And I was nervous for many reasons to approach it. So I'm very happy that you have been able to help me begin this process and finally create something that I've been wanting to do for so long. So thank you very much. We're definitely going to have to do this again.
Yeah, you're rediscovering your adult playground, and this is one of the toys that you're now jumping on.
Yeah. Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
Let's do this later again. Maybe get some new expanded wisdom from your other guests and so on. So
yeah. Awesome. That sounds great. Okay, so there you have it. The first episode in the Conscious Parenting series hosted on the Bitcoin Consciousness podcast. Again, I just want to relay my gratitude for Sama for getting me started here and for his insights and perspectives. You know, the more I go through life and continue to grow, the more that I realize that the more I can question and expand my models of everything that I believe, the more exciting and brighter the world becomes. So I hope Sama and I were able to do that for you today. If you are at all interested in reaching out, please do so. I'm going to put our contact info in the show notes, but easiest way is usually through Twitter. So I'm at HLDBTC, and Sama is at Sama Katharo. Also, feel free to connect with us and other people in the Bitcoin consciousness community through bitcoin-consciousness.com. We've got a ton of awesome articles. All the other podcasts are there. There's a Bitcoin consciousness community that is currently hosted on Telegram. Just a lot of great stuff for people who want to continue expanding and growing. So thank you again, and I cannot wait to see where this journey takes us.